Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us here today at our meeting. I'm Vladimir. I'm in charge. I represent in the InnoStage company, and today I would like to talk about this practice of creating the cybersecurity centers, and I would like to share some experience of implementing our own threat protection facility that we established. In the beginning, I would like to say that you can ask me questions on the website, at the standoff website, and in the end of my presentation, I would like to get all of your questions and try to answer these questions. In the beginning of this story, I would like to briefly recall the main targets of protection security, and here I would like to talk about these tasks not only being compliant with various norms and rules and protection of information assets from threats, malicious threats that are indeed relevant, as it was proven by general practice, and this standoff, which shows the opposition of the attackers and defenders, proves that. They're showing the level of professional expertise and their abilities. It proves that. But we need to remember about the business targets, which the minimal impact on the production and the increase of the effectiveness through the cybersecurity implementation. And one of the tools of the resolution and the compliance of the business targets are security centers, SOCs, I'm sorry. So the cyber protection tools. And let's just stipulate what these SOCs are all about. There's a special team. There's a special team that of the professionals that detect, prevent, and liquidate computer-related incidents. And this team in particular requires technologies, requires processes, and such security operations centers do conduct such things. But apart from those things, we also indicate knowledge and expertise, which we believe are an integral part of an efficient security center, like all the other components. Let's just recall the history of the establishment of security operations centers. You can see this evolution of SOCs according to HP. Security operations centers were mainly focused on the protection against malicious software, and mainly they were focusing on detection and reaction and protection. Such things like protection was addressed in a very creative way, in an ad hoc way. SOCs have been developing with technology, of course, as the attacks vectors have been changing, as the number of threats was growing. The ideas and strategies and the methods of the attackers and security operations centers were changing. As a result, with the increased load, it resulted in the following problems, like complicated scalability. An efficient security operations center is very hard to scale up by just adding the number of employees. This approach is not considered to be an efficient one and slows down the reaction time. Apart from that, the problem of the classic security operations center is shortage of experienced experts. It's hard to find them. These are rare experts to find. It's hard to train them. It's hard to keep them and retain such experts. And the team would always have a crushing number of an ongoing burden of threats. And the use of the classic SOC would not apply here. As a result, the team gets constantly overloaded and they don't seem to manage to process the entire number of threats, which results in problems. Various systems and protection tools are poorly integrated with one another. They don't have enough interoperability, which aggravates the automation process, requires quite a lot of manual input, and leads to issues when reacting to threats. Thus, traditional monitoring methods like I was saying, puts the protection behind, and such methods have already become not so efficient. Therefore, they are being replaced with the new concept of the new generation SOCs. Such SOCs would have to make you go away from the reactive approach to the proactive protection. This particular slide depicts the main principles of security operations centers of the new generations, next generation SOCs. These principles are enumerated here. Apart from those principles, what would tell a classic SOC from the new generation SOC? We would single out three principal components. The storage of big volumes of data, not only the security elements, but all the data, for very timely and on time, which is crucial, reaction. Because if we dated back 3 weeks, there is no talking about relevance. It would be too late before we just decompress and open the archive. So the new generation SOC is about working with big data and identifying new threats, the so-called threat hunting and response. Yet another important point here is the so-called orchestration. And obviously the automation of detection and neutralizing of such incidents, which would definitely minimize the load on the workforce and help us scale up in a more efficient manner. Here we have singled out the main functions of new generation SOC that I would like to draw your attention to and speak about prevention. First and foremost, it's the inventory of the IT assets. The monitoring center should be aware of the asset under defense. They should be aware of the infrastructure and the business processes in it. Only on condition of that, they can be very effective in providing this defense. Apart from that, for that, we would relate the detection and identification of vulnerabilities. This, of course, does not require any specific comments, I guess, because I think it's much easier to prevent the breach rather than reacting on it when the threat is being implemented and the criminal has already utilized some kind of a vulnerability at the edge of your network. So the prevention group relates to the investigation, data collection from various open sources. It could also be the analysis of relevant threats for the protected asset, and so on. So the prevention task in terms of the new generation SOCs are key here. They would also have to run constantly. You would have to maintain all of them in the relevant stage. We would have to constantly and on a regular basis conduct the analysis of the vulnerabilities and identify all of the problems detected, and would have to constantly analyze the constant contemporary threats, do the investigation, see how the landscape is changing and how we're supposed to protect our asset. The next task that we'll have to embark upon is the detection. They are not so different from the classic SOC. It's the acceptance of the messages, the registration of incidents, and verification of such incidents. The next task that we would have to draw special attention to when implementing security operations centers is the liquidation. To react, you have to plan and control this whole procedure. When such incidents arise and when attacks are conducted, you need to stipulate how we're going to interact with one another, how we're going to interact with the regulator and with the various maintenance companies. We would have to take into account all such things beforehand, and only on condition of that we can have successful outcome. And the finishing stage is the improvement stage. This is where, as far as we can see, the work of the security expert is just like a squirrel running inside a wheel. It's an ongoing process, and we'd have to constantly react, liquidate such incidents and do all of the necessary adjustments, analyzing the causes of such attacks, if such attacks did happen, follow through the effectiveness of such operations, and introduce the amendments if necessary. Now I would like to speak about the technology stack of the next generation SOC. Here we can single out certain classes of means and tools that split into 5 levels. The first is actually gathering. storage and data management. That's not just the security-related data. It also contains some auxiliary data and additional information that we would have to tackle. Asset management technologies are used here, and log management technologies are used here with the big data stack. Elastic, for instance, Hadoop, and so forth, famous market names. The next level of the next generation SOC, after that, is the monitoring level and data analysis. At this particular level, we single out well-established technologies like CM and the new tools that would have to exist in order to increase the visibility of the network to more effectively react to the rising threats and attacks, thus having threat intelligence, network traffic analyzer, the behavioral analysis of users, and the behavioral analysis of software. The next level we identify here in the next generation SOC is the automation of the reaction. The main component is the so-called incident response platform, which is the center of all of the main processes, and later on I will be speaking about that more in detail. Around this, the automation of all of the tasks of our center is centered, and on top of the stack we have the reporting visualization. We can use convenient tools for that, like the existing tools in the company, as well as the additional ones. It really all depends on your tasks. It really all depends on the type of reporting and the recipient of the reports, depending on the dashboards, depending on who is going to use that information, whether it's going to be used by the operators or the analysts or the top management. This technology stack is unlimited, I would say. The next thing we would like to consider is the organizational model of the Security Operations Center. We consider the detection time and the reaction time to the incident to be the main option. These incidents do not happen just all of a sudden, and the real hazardous and dangerous incidents require quite a lot of investigation from the malicious of the malicious party. Such activities should be detected as early as possible in order not to result in this threat to come into force. So we believe in the monitoring center there should be 3 lines of experts dedicated. The first is the front line, the first line, to combat the threats and incidents. The experts on this line should be focused on the very fast reaction to the typical incidents, following the precise instructions, reacting to the incidents in order to really cut down on time and process more and more data that is perceived by such a service. The second line is a more complicated level, which considers the cases that have not been covered by standard responses, for which you'd have to interact with your co-workers, administrators, service providers, etc. This list can be quite long, endless rather. And the third line is specializing in the so-called hunting, the proactive search and threat detection, and more complicated and complex cases. And they are also doing advanced forensic. Basically, this is the first part of my story about how the SOC, new generation SOC, looks like. Now the second part, which is more practical, which is based upon our experience. And it is showing how we've implemented all that in practice. The so-called cyber art SOC, best practices. This is the organizational chart. We have resulted in having the following composition of our team. The first group is the defense analysis group, those who do the inventory of the asset, those who detect the vulnerabilities, those who develop the recommendations on eradicating the vulnerabilities. Also, we have monitoring solutions. The so-called dedicated red team that specializes in red teaming. And that's what we do at the standoff with the red team, with the blue team. With the blue team, we have our people participating. The monitoring and the reaction group is the second one, which is made up of the 24/7 monitors. These monitors would have to very quickly diagnose and detect and process the incoming data. This group also has the InfoSec experts that are attached to every facility controlled by us. They work with their own dedicated expert that knows the specifics, knows all the subtleties of the infrastructure. And thanks to that, it provides efficient interaction. The next group is the quality control group, which is service managers that take control of SLAs and SOCs, and the organizational part of the interaction with the customer. and take control of the customer. When, for example, we report about vulnerabilities to the customer, and the customer accepts our recommendations on eliminating them, one of the service manager's tasks is to follow through the completion of such tasks, and as a result of sending this information from specialists to non-experts, as the vulnerability is removed, we complete the secondary verification, and after that we close the vulnerability case. And two additional groups, the development group, the analysts of cyber threats, the experts who do the free search, free investigation, taking information from open sources, and they also perform the analysis, and they support all of our technological platforms, also those installed at the customer side. In the beginning of presentation, we were saying, and I was explaining, that one of the major components is knowledge, is the expertise. And this slide actually depicts a very brief structure of how we accumulate the knowledge. Everything is arranged and put into our Safeguard Analytics database, which is made up of 4 structural components. First of all, the knowledge related to the IT assets and the defense tools, systems and applications. We accumulate the information on how such components function and how we need to arrange the monitoring of an operating system like Linux, for instance, which audit parameters should be engaged to eliminate the threats, and what recommendations to data protection should be applied. We accumulate all that in each class of and we accumulate that in database. Unfortunately, I stopped hearing the speaker. There's a problem with communication. And these are the bits of data we have been gathering for our work. Everything is put in our knowledge base and is used at our practical cases. We also get different bulletins from different communities, expert communities and regulators, and we utilize this information. Also, we have the so-called feeds that belong to the relevant information. We have a presentation at 2 o'clock Moscow time. In the course of our track, Anton Kalinin is going to give a more detailed presentation about that and how to work with this data. So please join us for that presentation. And the third and a very important component is the computer incident detection. That's what's used for the detection and prevention of the threats, which is made up of two main sections. As far as you can see in the slide, the first one is the monitoring of various computer attacks with the methodology and the second part, apart from the kill change and MITRE. So if we have protection tools, if we have the knowledge, the protection tools, typical services like DNS and so forth, with the use of these analytics, we can conduct our monitoring. And the fourth component of our knowledge base is the so-called typical procedures, typical plans that we adapt working with each particular object. Apart from the description of the activities, it has various automation scripts for getting the context information. It also has various recommendations on localization and the liquidation of such events. It has some recommendations on procedures from the administrators. It helps very quickly identify the threat source, and if such a threat arises, we do not waste our time on identifying the responsibilities, but instead start tackling this threat immediately. Further on, I will be speaking about how we make these processes. This is the technology-related slide. It's a very busy slide. I'm not going to stop at it for a long time, so we will just be speaking about how we use different tools for our monitoring center. Here we would like to highlight, like I was saying, that a typical component of this center was the so-called incident response platform, and you can see it here. It's the linking point for all of the activities, for all of the interaction between the experts in our center. Now, we would like to say a few words about the processes. I'm not going to stop at this slide for a long time because it will be followed, my presentation will be followed by Anton Kuzmin, a colleague of mine. He's going to speak about how we work with the customers and how we arrange this process of working with the customers. These tasks are not trivial, and they require quite a lot of adopting and agreeing it with the customer, aligning it with the customer at the facility, changing the work practices to make sure that the center operates properly. They need to have something to work with properly. That's the key for success of the SOC application. To make sure that we achieve such success, we use a number of well-tested tools for process modeling. For instance, here's a model of one such process. My colleague will be speaking more in detail about such process. It's a time-tested, well-established RACI matrix, which helps in a very simple chart design to set the responsibilities of each particular interaction scenario. And it really helps us save quite a lot of time, not wasting time on creating long lists of instructions. Instead, the use of such matrices allows us to agree with all of the people responsible, and later, if necessary, it can be made a part of a big regulation where everything will be explained in more words if necessary. This next slide is just showing that all of these steps, the graphical design, the matrices are made are the roots to make sure that these processes really work. We need to make sure that automation is present where necessary, and the ending step is the automation. Of course, it's the ending but yet most important step. With the use of the automation, we can increase the effectiveness of the reaction to the incidents. I would like to show you one of the screenshots from Next Stage ERP. We are using the platform which we have developed in our company. It's a standalone product which was explained on Monday on a separate track. There were separate presentations, separate reports on that. If you're interested about that platform, recordings are available on the website. You can check them or contact us. We will provide you with more information. And in the end, I would like to briefly speak about the technologies and the tools we use when we work with our cybersecurity center. Our inventory of the information resources is huge. Maintaining the relevant data, we do it with the use of different tools like network scanners, CM systems, but one of the key and most efficient measures would be the aggregation of data from the existing systems, like, for example, the protection system data is a good source of that. Or, for example, antivirus software, which is normally installed everywhere, which would give quite a lot of information about the nodes, about the configuration. and you can get the information about the vulnerabilities from there. And where it's not covered, that's where you can use active search, discovery, and use network scanners for that, and use more specialized tools. The next set of tools is the analysis of the protection level. We use a classic set of tools. I'm not going to stop at this slide for a long time. I would like to just remind you that the analysis of the protection identifies the vulnerabilities detected. Such vulnerabilities needs to be identified with recommendations applied. And the key to success here, to make an effective process on vulnerability detection, is the automation and control. Next stage, IRP, is the platform that we are using here to manage these processes, that all of the vulnerabilities detected that have been identified, they turn into tasks on our platform, and these tasks are delegated to people responsible on the customer side, and the service manager would utilize this tool to monitor the vulnerability eradication process. The next block is the threat analysis. Here we get data about threats. We have data from different media channels, our own analysis of the malware samples, and the recommendations on counteraction. We're using OSINT tools, we use sandboxes, and the core of all of that is the threat management platform, which accumulates and aggregates all of the relevant tools, and we will be speaking about this platform more in detail at 2 o'clock. The monitoring and detection, it's a classic set of tools where we would like to single out the database which I mentioned, and all of the information regarding that, all of the instructions and manuals on how to connect and adjust it is stored there. Apart from that, we use big data technologies which was mentioned, and well-recommended protection tools. And finally, the reaction. That is automation of the procedure, automation of the interaction, informing, notifications, and the so-called orchestration of the protection tools. If there is a possibility to automate this process, it would be much easier to automate that rather than contacting the administrator with a request to delete some kind of a phishing emails. You can automate that process quite easily and have proper interaction with the through end-to-end processes when experts tackle their own functions and they serve their own goal. That's what the next stage IRP functionality allows us to do. That's the end of my story. I'd be happy to take your questions, if any. I think we should wait for a while for these questions to come up. My colleagues will send your questions to me anyway. Unfortunately, we've been having trouble hearing the speaker during the course of this presentation because of the connectivity problem. The sound would interrupt every once in a while. Thank you. You can send your questions to the chat. They will be recorded and we will answer your questions. But it seems like that there are no questions here where I would like to close this session. Thank you very much for joining us here. I hope it was useful. Thank you. Goodbye.